So welcome everyone. And today we have my colleague Lucy from the Open Data Institute, who is going to be talking to you all about how to use open data. And as a reminder, this is part of the webinar series for the IDSP Data Challenge, registration for which will open on the 8th of February. But if you haven't already pre-registered for the challenge, I highly recommend you do so. I will put the email address in the chat. So if you just email that email address to pre-register, I'll also put out a link to the challenge platform, sorry, to the landing page for the challenge before the platform launches. So you can find out more about what's going on. Please do pre-register for the challenge if you would like any of the information from today sent to you afterwards. As a note, I don't get any of your email addresses when you signed up for this webinar, so I'll only have your email address to send you things if you have pre-registered. So that was the admin part from me, and I will hand over to my colleague Lucy, who will talk you through her presentation and guidance on how to use open data, and we will have time for a Q&A as well. So if you have got any questions for Lucy, please put them. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can ask questions in there. And any technical issues or anything like that, you can put them into the chat, but please do ask questions for Lucy or myself in the Q&A. Pass over to you, Lucy.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Let me just get my slides up. That looks approximately correct. There we go. Can everybody see that okay? Just to double check. And I need to close a bunch of windows. I have lost you all. Bear with me.
We can see the title slide, Lucy.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Right, so this is a presentation about how to use open data. We're going to go through quite a few different elements of my experience, my advice to you, and lots of this is relevant to all data, not just open data. But we are going to focus on the things that make open data great and the things that make open data tricky sometimes to use a bit. So I'm giving you this presentation for a bunch of different reasons. We have many awesome people working at ODI, but this one is quite close to my heart because not only, obviously, I work for the ODI, I'm an open data proponent, but I've also been in my time a local authority open data publisher, an open data person. And I also work in ecology conservation type projects in my local area in the southwest of England. So all of this is very, very close to my heart. So hopefully that means I can give you some solid advice on what to do and indeed what not to do. So let's have a little look. First things first, let's define the challenge. Now, if you've been to the webpage, then you will have seen the details of what it is you're being asked to think about and what you're being asked to do. Framing the problem. One of the bits that I picked out here is that this is about helping local authorities to do more, to do what they can, to tackle climate change and to meet these net zero goals. Now, it says here, local governments, local authorities are making decisions every day that impact our lives, the way that we, move around the place that we live and that access services, and also they're making decisions that can help address climate change. And one of the things that I particularly wanted to pull out from the challenge sort of problem statement was, what can local government do? And that's a really simple little question, which is actually really, really loaded because the answer is, sorry, my slides are really playing up. The answer is, it depends. It depends. It depends what kind of, we'll get there. It depends what kind of local authority we're talking about. There are many different types in the UK, and this is probably the best and most definitive list. It comes direct from the government side. So unitary authorities, London boroughs, metropolitan districts, county councils, district councils, town and parish councils. And all of these different types of authorities have different duties, they have different powers, and they have different elements that they may or may not control. So things like housing, if you're thinking about energy efficiency and reducing emissions in that sphere, not all local authorities manage housing. Not all local authorities have any control over these things whatsoever. If you're thinking about supporting people on low incomes, if you're thinking about fuel poverty, not all local authorities manage housing benefit or collect council tax. So knowing who does what can be very, very helpful. So one thing I will direct you to right here, right now, is there are lists of the things that different local authorities can do and do control, the duties that they have. Might be a useful reference. If you were thinking of zeroing in on a particular geographical area, this would be a good way to find out which local authorities can do what and who you might want to talk to about what. Right, that's the challenge. Let's do definitions. When we talk about data, there's been a saying around for a good few years now, data is like oil. Data is the new oil. We don't like that. We don't like that saying for a bunch of reasons. I'm stealing what I'm going to say next directly from our former Vice President, Jenny Tennyson. Apologies to Jenny, but I'm sure she'd like this message to be spread. Data is not like oil. Data is like roads. It's not like oil because if you have data and you make something with it, you still have the data. You have oil and you make something with it. You don't have oil anymore. You have plastic or some other fuel or whatever the case may be. You have byproducts. With data, you make something with data and you still have the data. You can make something and you can give it away and you still have the data. You can give the data away once, twice, 100 times and you still have the data. So it's an asset, yes, but it's not one of those things that you have to hold close and it be precious. It's something that you can share the thing itself, share the things that you make with it, and that value just keeps spreading. Okay, so data is not like oil. If you remember nothing else, remember that one. And the thing to think about with all types of data, especially with open data, is that when you start turning your data into a thing, you're moving it up, and you may have seen this pyramid before, you're moving it up the pyramid. You add context to create information. You add relevance or salience, some situational aspect to turn it into knowledge. I know something, therefore I can do something, and that's insight at the very top. And as you move up that pyramid, you're slimming down what you're giving to people. The data is this big raw chunk at the bottom. And if you want to turn it into information, you might have to summarize, you might have to filter, you might have to aggregate. What you give in terms of information is less bulky than the data would have been. Moving up again to knowledge, you may well be summarizing, filtering, aggregating, or just picking out key messages, even more so. And when you get to insight, and you get literally to the point at the top, you are providing somebody with a recommendation or an action. Here is a thing you can do. And as you move up that pyramid, you're making decisions about what gets left out. You're making decisions about what maybe isn't relevant or isn't interesting, or you don't want to emphasize. It carries a certain amount of responsibility. So as you work through whatever projects you decide on for your challenges, bear this in mind. The more work you do, the more you are taking away other people's ability to do that for themselves. If they don't have access to the data, all they have is what you give them. It carries some accountability for making sure that you are making good decisions about that, truthful, balanced decisions about what should go forward, and that you document the decisions that you've made. Right, that'll do for definitions. Why open data is the subject of the next bit. Why open data? This is deliberately ambiguous. It could mean, why should we open data? Or it could mean, why should we use open data? Why is open data a thing? And I'm going to tackle kind of both of those things. So firstly, you may already have seen this, our open data, well, our data spectrum. When we're working with data, obviously there is open data, there is data that's closed, private, personal, but it's not a binary thing. There's various states of shared in between. So if you start at the closed end and think about data that only you can know, it's absolutely closed, then it might be things like your passwords, your PIN number for your bank card, that sort of thing. But sticking with the banking theme, if you start to move across things like your transactions on your bank account, your bank statements, Other people can see those under very specific circumstances, like a spouse, if you have a joint account, your bank manager. Obviously, anybody who handles your account at the bank can look at those transactions under certain conditions. You keep moving across, there might be data that limited groups could access and use. So, for example, your payroll department is allowed to know your bank account details to make sure that you get paid. Move it along a little bit more, your salary might well be published. If you are in a particular role in a particular organization, it might be something that goes up on a website to say this is what our top people get paid. Yeah, and so on and so on. The point is that as we move across, the more we make this data available, the more we're able to share it, the more value it has, both to us as the person who shares and to the people who want to use it to make something with it. So getting it to shareable state, getting it to an open state means that more people will be able to make use of it and do things with it. So why do we open data? Because it makes things better, because it creates far more opportunities for people to innovate, to create, and to solve problems that maybe we hadn't been able to. And this is particularly true, I think, in a local government context, where local government's busy doing the thing that they're paid to do, which is providing services. And as much as they would love to do all these wonderful, cool innovations and take some time to play with other data and make new things, it's not a priority, and particularly not when we're still quite deep into, you know, COVID and everything that carries with it. Supporting people is the job the local authority is there to do. Innovating, if they can, they will, but they may not have time. So opening up some of that data and letting other people have a go means that that value can be realized, even if the local authorities themselves aren't able to, don't have the time or the resource. I see chat scrolling up. Yeah, we're a bit UK centric at the moment, but that is going to change. So don't worry. I'm going to try not to make it too focused on England. So why do we open data? Because having that available means that anyone can go grab it and make something amazing with it. And it opens up all sorts of new opportunities. So the definition of open data specifically is data that anyone can access, use and share. And I'm just going to go back to the spectrum. There is a kind of let's say a grey area, but it's not really. It is actually reasonably clear once you understand what's going on. Where you have data that anyone can access, but they can't use or share it, that's a large chunk of what's actually published on the internet. It's public, but you can't just take it and do what you want with it. Yeah. Data that literally anyone can access, use and share will be quite specifically marked as such. That definition is quite short, quite pithy. And all of those short little words are doing a great deal of work. So access, can I find it? Can I get it? Use, can I make stuff with it? Share, can I publish onwards without restrictions? And also the word anyone, which is probably doing the most heavy lifting of any word in that sentence. That anyone means it doesn't matter what you plan to do with it. It means it doesn't matter who you work for, even if it's my primary competitor. It means it doesn't matter who you vote for. I don't have to agree with your political views or you with mine. It means even if you are my worst critic, my worst enemy, you can still have my data. Because I don't need to know who you are. There are no restrictions. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to give me your name, your email address. You don't have to tell me what you're planning to do with it. You can have the data. Anyone can have the data. So tiny short little word means a great deal. Excuse me. And when you're looking for open data, the way that you will know, going back to the spectrum again, just because something is public does not necessarily mean that you can use it. For something to be open data, it will explicitly say so with some license. And there are a few variations, which I'll talk about in a moment. Okay, so an open license will clearly and explicitly say this data is published under this open license, and the license will be linked to, hopefully, or it'll actually be on the page if it's a nice little short one, and it will have three main components. It will say you can, the things that you can do. So, for example, the Open Government License, UK one, says something like you are free to modify, distribute, exploit, including commercially, blah, blah, blah. It gives a list of all the things that you're allowed to do. There'll be a section that will say you must. These are the things that you must do. Marco, I see you asking the difficult questions there. I'll get to that in a moment. Things that you must do, and these usually include conditions like, if you use my data, credit me, tell people where you got it from. Yeah, attribution. And also sometimes there's a share alike clause. If you received it as open data under an open license, you must share and publish whatever you make with it under the same conditions. Okay. The last section of the license will be around things you cannot do. Okay. So I think probably the best example, again, just to go back to the UK Open Government License, it just has a few tiny things like be cautious if the data you're accessing includes personal information, which it shouldn't if it's open data. Crown copyright, identity documents, military insignia, be cautious around elements that will have some kind of IP rights that aren't covered by the open license. So it'll say, yes, you can, here are the things you can do. If you do, then you must also attribute, share alike, and a few caveats at the end. So just because I've got chat actually open and scrolling, I'll just very quickly look at these queries that we got coming in. Is open data always free? So I said that some of the licenses will say you are free to. And when we say you should be freely available or you're free to do the following things, what basically we're saying free as in free speech. Yes, you can, you're allowed, please don't worry about it, just get on with it. Open data, it ought to be free. Largely, I would say, I think it should be. That said, sometimes there is a cost to providing it. So whilst government open data pretty much always is available at no cost, and this is because as government and local government, we already got paid to show up, and I say we because I've left local government, but it sticks with you. We already got paid to show up and do our jobs, and the data is a byproduct of us doing our jobs, so we don't get to charge for it again. There are models where you can charge not for the data necessarily, but for better access to the data. So someone's mentioning APIs. So some companies provide open data and they do so via an API. And if you want basic access to that API, like 5 queries a day, that's free. If you want elevated access, like you want, I don't know, 1,000 calls per second and a guaranteed uptime of 99.8%, that's something that you pay for, because that level of service requires quite a lot of infrastructure, maintenance, and experts on hand. Okay, so Marco, I hope that answered your question. I'm just going to, so Al's question, if you can only access it via an API and not able to download it, that is limiting. That is limiting, I agree. It becomes a skills thing. For some publishers, they have an expectation that the sorts of people who will want to use particularly the data that they're publishing will be comfortable with APIs. That said, APIs are not nearly as scary as you think they are. Trust me on this. It is entirely possible to get to grips with APIs. Okay. I have a whole nother set of slides on that topic, which sadly I don't think we'll have time for today. But yes, sometimes those very technical access requirements can be a barrier. And this is a good point. I think I'm going to touch on it a few slides further on. But where people are providing open data, it's good practice for the publisher to have some kind of a feedback mechanism, an email address or mailbox that's monitored, or the GitHub contributor handle of the main committer that says, you know, if you need something that I'm not providing, if this format isn't working for you, if this access mechanism isn't working for you, drop me a message. So when you're publishing open data, and if you are going to ever be a publisher, bear that in mind. People will want to reach out and ask questions and say, I can't use an API, I just need a CSV. Please, can I have a download button? Right, who else's questions have we got? Stefan's, the format, complicated, convoluted, yes, absolutely. And to the same point, for publishers, it's always good practice to include a way for people to just get back to you and say, I'm having an issue with the way you're making this available. Thank you, by the way, for making it available, but I'm having a problem with it. Is there another option for me? Okay. Can I list the major databases available beyond UK power networks and the planetary computer data? Well, yes and no. I could sit and list every open data source that I'm aware of. We don't have time for that. And then I would miss some because there might be some other ones that I don't know about. But yeah, good question. Right, any questions about licensing before I move it along? I was going to look at a couple of examples. All good, I think. Right, let's have a little look. Options that you might encounter. Creative Commons, pretty common. You might see these, indeed on some of our slides, you will see a Creative Commons little image down at the bottom. Nice thing about Creative Commons is that when you are going to be publishing, you can go and create the one that you want to apply to your work. And as you can see, you can pick from the options, what do you want to allow? What are you happy to let people do with your data? Okay, so when you see a Creative Commons license, you might see a URL linking back, or you might see symbols like these. So Creative Commons, and then this is attribute. So the person symbol means attribute, please credit your source, and share alike, that kind of recycling swirly arrow. Okay, there are variations, but that's the one, that'll be open data. That's something, yes, you can take it and use it. And please, credit your source and please share onwards. Tara, can I leave you to handle the question from Al about lists and web pages?
Yes, I'll go back to Al on that.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, another open license. So US data, US government data, the expectation is that if it's created by US government employees in the pursuit of actually doing their jobs, it's open, it's in the public domain, which is nice and neat because you don't have to go look for it. You can just say, yes, it definitely is. And they helpfully include on this page, which I think I've just grabbed from Project Open Data, they include some of the other licenses you might expect to see. But that's nice and clear. And again, I think that's taking the attitude that government employees get paid to show up and do their actual jobs. The data is kind of incidental, exhaust data, a byproduct of that job being done. The data itself is freely available to people to go get and do something useful with. That is a nice way to approach it. Microsoft have their own open use of data agreement here, which I've pulled from their GitHub. And it's pretty much the same. You can take it, you can do stuff, you can make things, you won't be sued, you won't be restricted, and so on. It's saying the same thing. Yes, you can. Okay. Right. Finding open data. So one of the big challenges about using open data is actually tracking down where it is. I think relevant to Al's question here. Sometimes there is no simple list of everything that you need to know, and you have to go searching. And this is fine, and this is perfectly standard. It does help to have some idea of, well, these three things. Who is working in this space? Who might have an interest in this particular topic, in this particular problem and how to solve it? What organizations have a stake? What organizations are funded by government or other means to tackle this problem? All of that. You might be thinking about what are the keywords? What are the topics? Okay. And then finally, where might there be things happening, collaborations, portals and platforms specifically for collecting this data together? All right, so let's tackle the who first. In this instance, who is interested in working in this space? Well, we've already got local authorities. So what do councils publish? What do local authorities publish? We've got a bunch of different things. I just did a very, very quick Google search, as you can see, and it comes up with MHCLG, which has now been renamed as a government department. which has data about local authorities because that's their remit. We've got local government open data case studies, the Local Government Association, very, very helpful organization, and a council, Bristol City Council, which is publishing open data. Open data and standards, that's LGA again, and local authority housing data. So lots of different sources there that you could potentially follow up and have a look at. Okay. I think further down in this list, but I didn't manage to fit it onto this slide, data.gov.uk, which is a UK government kind of portal repository for open data that local authorities and government departments are publishing. Might be a place to start. US has got some very similar stuff. So if you wanted to search for things specific to US or other jurisdictions, Google it. Just Google it. Federal open data. Yeah. US county level open data. See what people are putting out there. Lots and lots of US cities publish some really, really good, rich open data. Really good quality. Europe has a bunch of really good stuff happening as well. So wherever you are in the world, you should be able to find something. One of the other things that you might come across as you're doing these searches, there was a mention of climate emergency plans. And I had a little search, actually Somerset, so this is near me. This is their emergency plan, the document that they've actually published online. As you're searching for data, one of the things that will probably jump out at you is thinking about the variety, the amount of different council, local authority types there are, not just in the UK, but around the world, and their different responsibilities. Figuring out what they can do and what they might do and what they want to do and what they want to prioritize, you probably have to get quite detailed and actually delve into a specific area. But emergency plans like this give you a sense not just of what that particular area or that particular local government body feels is important, but also what they feel they have power to impact. So on this one, they're talking about transport emissions, here we are. Reducing transport emissions in Somerset will be a considerable challenge due to the rurality of the county. Makes it difficult for public transport schemes to connect dispersed communities. So that is something that they would love to tackle, but actually because of the geography and the infrastructure in that particular place, it might be an issue. If you looked at a more urban local authority, it might be a very different story. The public transport might be one of the things that they could deal with very, very easily. And actually, the quality of housing might be their biggest issue. So context can really matter. Not every local authority, not every town, state, city, county is going to have the same problems that they're facing. Okay, so once you start adding that local kind of slant, there will be different problems to look into, but also potentially smaller data sets, smaller organizations, local campaign groups that may pop up as you're doing those searches. Yeah, that wouldn't pop up at a national level. And yeah, speaking of campaign groups, so as I was Googling, I also came across this one, and I think this is linked through directly from the webpage. So thinking about calculating actually what is the output, what is the consumption, and what impact is that having on the environment. Very nice little data set that you can download to quite a detailed level. Parish, ward, local authority or national, different types of footprint, territorial or consumption-based footprints. Nice CSV, and actually did download this and play with it a little bit. So all sorts of things that might be out there that you can choose from. Now thinking about the what. Searching for what you're looking for, well, you just need to pick your keywords with care. I'm sure none of you need teaching how to Google, but obviously simpler is better. The less specific you are, the more results you're going to get back, but the less likely you are to inadvertently filter out the exact thing that you're looking for. So searching simply for energy and open and data, we've got open energy, that looks okay. Open data at the Center for Sustainable Energy, that could be very interesting. Open energy data, that looks like a US source, that's good. We've got the UK Power Network's open data portal that you will see linked on the challenge page. Yeah, there's open power system data. Didn't have time to look at that one, but all sorts of possible options there. And if that doesn't look like exactly what you needed, well, you could add another keyword and just see what comes up. And it kind of links back a little to the who as well. Which of those sources do you feel might be not just expert, but also reliable and balanced in what they're providing? Which of those sources do you feel might be the definitive authority on that thing? Or actually, do you want to go smaller scale and find the people who have one particular view? Like if you're looking for campaigners, they're going to have a different point of view to energy providers, who are going to have a different point of view to local authorities, who are going to have a different point of view maybe to residents. Whose point of view do you want to pull out? Whose point of view do you want to tease out, surface and examine? Just checking in case I've missed any other questions.
I think, Lucy, we can put some of these questions we can come back to at the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just reading Steve's comment there. It's like, yes, there are many portals, and some are good, and some are cluttered, and some are out of date, and some are unmaintained. And really, you just have to go and search and see which ones meet your needs. Right, so we've done the who, we've done the what, and finally it's the where. So talking about portals and platforms, there are many, and some of them are great, as I was just saying, and some of them could use a little love, and some of them haven't been updated in a while. And it is up to you to go and examine each one that you think might be relevant or helpful and see, is it providing what you actually need? Okay, I think in this case, I had a little look for knowing that a lot of local authorities publish open data, and some of them have platforms and portals, and Bristol has a particularly good reputation. Okay, it's one of a number of kind of exemplar authorities who really work hard at not just publishing open data, but keeping it up to date and making it as good quality as they possibly can. So they've got this very nice portal that you can go and search, and you can look for, you know, search by keyword, search by theme. And so I did, just as a quick example, just looking at the theme of energy. I've got a list of different data sets. They very clearly say, you know, what is this? What data is this? What does it cover? What tags have they applied to it? If it's, you know, something that's interesting, like solar, I think I picked on. Yeah, here we go. Solar potential, assessment of the suitability of building roofs for the installation of solar panels. That might be something you want to explore. If so, yeah, here it is. Go for it. You can examine the data. And this is one of the nice things about portals, is they usually give the option to actually do a little preview and see whether this data contains the things that you actually need from it. Is it granular enough? Is it detailed enough? Does it have the particular attribute in it that you want to analyze? Okay. So in this case, it's pretty detailed. And it contains all sorts of additional stuff that I might not need for my analysis, but if I can download this, that would be great. You can see that you've got an export or download option. You've also got an API option, which is nice. Lots of portals will give you that choice. You can even look at it on a map. Okay, so actually looking at the properties. So you would be able to take that and actually map it in a geospatial or geographical analysis program. You can make good maps with it. And the API option, who is it saying APIs can be a bit of a challenge? Indeed they can, but a well set up portal like this one, or platform like this one, will enable you to basically build your query without having to know how to code. You can just create something that writes the query for you, as it were, and then you say, yes, that's what I want, give it to me, please. Okay, so happy to answer more specific questions at the end about APIs if we have time. And to Al's questions, if you can't download and you can't use more than one database, I'm not clear on what that question is asking, Al. Do you want to clarify that one, and I'll try and come back to that one. I think I know what you're getting at, but I want to be sure. Right, the finding open data on to, so the next question, because of this, the variation in what you might find and what you might want to use, somebody may not have done that work to pull it all together and to make it what you want. So you may have to not just filter and tidy up, but also properly clean up and validate data, that can be quite a lot of work. Now, everything here applies to all data, not just open data. It is good practice. If you're going to grab some data from somewhere and try to make use of it, it's entirely possible that you're going to find some issues with it. You might want to just open it up, examine it, have a good look and say, is this what I need? Is this good enough for the job at hand? You know, is this going to work for me? So starting with basic summary statistics, what shape, what distribution is this data taking? Is it what I would expect it to be? Is it very skewed? Yeah, is it problematic in some way? What are the limits, upper and lower, on the values that I'm seeing? And do they make sense? And particularly think about, you know, outliers. Are there any extreme values? Are they valid in context, or are they more likely to be errors? And how would you find out? This is where context is important. If you see something like there is a house prices database and there is a property that apparently was sold for £5, you might say, that seems pretty unlikely. But then you might look at it and go, oh, as it turns out, that last sold in 1943 when £5 was actually about what you'd expect to pay for a property at auction because it was dilapidated and about to fall down. Okay, fair enough. It's valid. It's weird, but it's valid. You might want to take that out of your data set, but you know now that it's a valid value. Okay, context is very important. Coverage as well. It's good if you're getting data through a well-maintained platform or portal like the Bristol one that we were just looking at. You can preview it. Does it include all the attributes that you needed? Does it cover all the geographical areas that you needed? Is it at the right level of detail? Yeah. If it's not on a portal platform and you've just downloaded as is and then open it up to have a look, you can explore it. Pivot tables are really helpful for a very, very quick look. So if open up in Excel, do a quick pivot table, does it seem to have the right sort of, I don't know, we're talking about UK geography, administrative boundaries. You might want it to district level, but actually it's only to county. You might want it to town boundaries, and actually they don't fit within councils very neatly whatsoever. So you want to have a look and see just how detailed is this? Is this right? Will this do the job for me? Or do I have to do some more analysis and more calculations to make it fit? Just as a quick example. So I downloaded the consumption data that I showed you just now from the impact.org. And very, very quickly had a look at the shape of the data and the distribution. It's quite a big data set, but I had a little play with it and just took the first 50 rows and just really quickly just plotted, like, what's the shape, what's the distribution? And I can see that for some of these attributes in here, there are lots of outliers. So for example, housing, mains gas, so consumption and tons of CO2 emission. For mains gas, lots of outliers. Don't know what those are, don't know which authorities those are, because this is by district, but I could go and check. Seems a little weird, but it may well be valid. Same for housing using oil as its main fuel, okay? It's a very, very, very quick way just to say, what's odd, what's unusual, what stands out, what might be a story? If it's valid, if it's strange, but it's valid, what's the story behind that? And is that something I can work with for this challenge? And similarly, thinking about mapping, same data set again, but I've taken one attribute, and I think that I took, just looking very quickly, we had, yeah, I think I took private transport. So the amount of emissions caused by people in that district using private transport, so private cars and so on. And you can see that this map didn't work out very well. I've connected that data set with some shape files, some map files, and there are large chunks of the country that are not mapped. And this is because the shape files that I went and got were for a different level of local authority to what the data set had. So it could match some of the local authorities, but not all. So it simply is an incomplete map because it couldn't match across those two sources. Okay. So visualizing really quickly, and this I'm doing in Python. It's not everybody's thing. If you don't code, don't worry about it. But for me, because I'm a trained data scientist, that for me is the quickest way to examine something in multiple different ways, maps and pivots and assorted other statistical analyses. You should use the tools that you're comfortable with. Okay. If you fancy doing in Python, there's some really, really good libraries, I will say. So that map didn't work because I have tried to match two data sets that don't really stitch together because they're at different levels in terms of which local authority layer or type they actually contain. When I redid it using the district map files, as you can see, I now have a complete map. What it's basically saying is the larger amounts of emissions are in the blue color and the lower amounts of emissions in the red color. So you see just up above and on that side of London, lots of emissions. Right down in the southwest of England, in Devon, so round about here is where I am, lots more emissions. Up at the top, Scotland, lots more emissions, because in those places, public transport isn't great. And so private transport is used more. Yeah, got a story developing already. Right. One very important lesson. If your data is rubbish, if your data is no good, it's not going to magically get better just because you plug it into Tableau or Power BI or Python, indeed. Okay, the software is not a magic box. The magic box in this algorithm is you. You are the algorithm, you are the magic box. You are the magical thing that is going to clean up this data and make it make sense. Just shoving it into some software is not going to make it happen. So you have to open up that data, have a little look at it, work out what's in it. Is it what you need? Does it make sense? Is there anything in there that makes you go, I'm not sure? Go find the context, work out what might be happening. And then you can start to think about, what is a valid and robust way to do your analysis, to make it make sense, and start to build the story that you want to produce. Okay. So thinking about data cleaning, these are all very, very common errors. These are all the sorts of things that we encounter, especially when we get sent stuff in Excel, okay, because you can have multiple date formats, and crucial one being between your British and American dates, but there are all sorts of different ways to represent dates. They can be very problematic. So if you have data in your data set, be very sure which particular format you actually have in there. Okay. Multiple representations of the same thing, so abbreviations, duplicate records. Okay, you could clean up your data set by getting rid of duplicates. Summary, row totals, column totals can sometimes get left in. Redundant data, so data that wasn't important to the person collecting it and creating that file. It can be a bit of a mess. Okay, if it's something that matters to you, but it didn't matter to the originator of the data set, you could be prepared to have a bad time to find that that data is missing or just simply very poor quality. Numeric ranges, you see this a lot. In order to anonymize the subjects in a data set, you might say, rather than giving their precise age, you might give an age range, 0 to 15, 16 to 45. 46 to 60, that sort of thing. Or the same for years of birth, which decade was somebody born in. That can be unhelpful, not just because you might have wanted that precision, but also because as that range is expressed, it becomes not a number. So it means you can't really do an analysis on it until you break it back out. Spelling errors, of course, your good old-fashioned typo. Right, they can be awkward if you're trying to look for something specific in your data and it's just been misspelled. You're not going to find it, or maybe you will, but then you'll have to account for that going forward. Right. Open Refine. Anybody use this? You're finding a lot of people haven't come across Open Refine. This is a really good way to clean up if you have structured data, usually tabular, but not always. Tara, do I have time to do a quick demo? I think I might have to move along. I'll come back to this. Open Refine is really
14 minutes total.
14 minutes, okay. Right, I'll come back to that. I'll finish the slides and then come back to this if I can. is a really good way of cleaning up messy data. Really, really good. And it is free. It is open source. You download it to your laptop or your computer, and your data does not leave your laptop. So it's as secure as your laptop is, as your computer is. Yeah, data stays on your machine. You clean it up on your machine. It never goes anywhere. And it's really, really powerful. I'll come back to that at the end if we have time. Wanted to cover the making something useful part, because this can be the thing that trips people up. When you're doing some analysis, you can get so into what it is that you're making, so excited about exploring the data, that it can be difficult to pull yourself back out and just go, what am I actually building? And who for? And why? And why do they need it? And what's the problem that I'm solving here? So thinking about what it is you're trying to build, and who it is that's going to use it, can be really helpful. So 3 main points from my personal experience. Keep these in mind very much. Firstly, tell the story. Okay, what's the problem? What happened? What impact is it having? What's going on now? What might be changed? What might happen if we do? Think about who your audience is, what they need to know and why. A second point is keep it simple. Don't make it difficult for people to figure out what's happening with the data that you've been analyzing. And lastly, think on paper. Paper prototypes, doodles, sketches, backs of envelopes are quick, they're cheap, they're effective, they really work, and they save you a great deal of grief. Okay, if you spend 100 hours building something and someone goes, that's not what I wanted, you've wasted 100 hours. You spend 5 minutes sketching something and saying, I think something a bit like this. They can say, no, that's not it. And you've only wasted 5 minutes. So communicate. Data analysis is a technical discipline that requires communication skills. Okay, it requires communication skills, the ability to craft a message and to understand the problem. And that involves talking to people and understanding what those people need. Keep it simple. Just because you have all the chart types, and this very much applies if you're using platforms like Tableau, Power BI, and others, just because you have all these beautiful chart types at your fingertips does not mean you should use them all, and certainly not all at once. Okay, stick to the visuals that people can understand at a glance. Things like radar charts, which is what this in the middle is supposed to be, can be really effective, but not everybody likes them. Not everybody can understand them, and certainly not at a glance. So be cautious about using complicated visual effects, okay, and data visualizations. And this one, thinking on paper. This is a genuine sketch version of something that I actually used to show to my chief exec and the head of HR at the council I used to work at. I'm thinking of building an HR dashboard that looks a bit like this. Is this something that you would use? And they said, yeah, that looks like something we could use. Go ahead. Okay, took me 5 minutes. Crayons beat code is the message there. It's a lot cheaper and simpler to prototype on paper whilst having a conversation than it is to sit down and code something, only to have people turn around and go, yeah, that's not quite what I wanted. Or actually, no, that doesn't make sense to me. So keep it simple, prototype on paper. Right. And as an example, so coming back to this consumption data, playing with it in Python again, did a very, very quick correlation matrix. This is basically saying to what extent does one value in this data set seem to have some correlation to another attribute in this data set. Excuse me. So the very dark lines where there is a much lower correlation or a negative correlation, in the very pale areas where there is a high correlation. So you can see that consumption of goods and services and the purchase of goods correlates very strongly to itself with a very pale square and a value of 1, yeah, and so on. And what this matrix is telling me is that things like if a property has mains gas, it is spectacularly unlikely, yeah, very negative correlation to have the other fuel types. Maybe it simply doesn't need them. I don't know. The peculiarity of houses that have gas heating. This is fine. What it was also telling me was that if purchase of goods, as you read across, it seems to have some correlation to the other stuff. Got me thinking about how much of this consumption stuff is actually related to type of property, but income as well. It's very rare for something like this not to come down to income. If people can afford to buy more, they can afford to consume more. Perhaps there will be a correlation to simply, if they're earning more, they're consuming more, they're producing more emissions. It's fairly simplistic story to start with, but it led me to start exploring the data itself on a map. And it led me to go and get one particular very, very nice data set, if you're going to be working with UK stuff, is the indices of multiple deprivation, which is published by the UK government. Okay. And this is basically looking at what are the different measures of deprivation in an area. And I decided to focus in on Devon. It's the county that I live in. Very red areas are the more deprived, very blue areas are the less deprived. And this particular subdomain is about barriers to housing and services. So where it is problematic for the majority of people living in that area to access decent housing and services for whatever reason. Quite a lot of Devon is very red in that regard. I had a little look. These are all the different columns that exist in that data set. This is my way of examining whether it's got what I want, what I need. One of the things I noted that we have indoors subdomain, as in the quality of housing in the built environment. It also has an outdoors subdomain, which is the quality of the outdoor environment. So is it a pretty place to live? It's green, has it got parks, has it got rivers? And so, excuse me, I thought it would be good just to very quickly show the different domains all on the same map. This one is income. So if areas are red or pink, they are more deprived in terms of income. People in the red and pink areas earn less money, per household. We score very, very well across the whole of Devon on the outdoors domain. It's a beautiful place to live. Very green, very green. Not so great on the indoors domain, that top right one. The quality of housing tends to be lower. Yeah, we've got older properties, perhaps not as efficient in terms of heating and insulation. Okay. And it's a very mixed picture in terms of the barriers to housing and services. And a lot of these barriers are to do with the rurality of the place. Okay, poor public transport links, poor infrastructure makes it difficult for people to access what they need. This is the beginning of a story. If we then overlay this with consumption, or use of private transport, or use of public transport, or the use of different fuel types, oil, gas, electricity, and so on and so forth, we could start building that richer picture. If we then go and see what the local authorities in that place actually control, whether they have responsibility for housing, whether they have responsibility for public transport, social care, and so on, we could start to think about what might we be advising that local authority to focus on so that they can start to contribute to net zero. Okay, so it's sketchy. It's the beginnings of maybe thinking about a story. But all I've been doing is just exploring a couple of open data sets that I found, one that I already know quite well and one that is new to me, and just visualizing them quickly to have a little look at what I might be able to do with them. That is the end of the actual slides. I'll leave that out there for a second and take questions, and then I'll come back to the couple of things I didn't have time for if we have time. So let me stop share. There we go. Any questions I haven't answered yet?
There's another question from Al in the chat. Should we use Jupyter Notebook?
You should absolutely use Jupyter Notebooks if you like Jupyter Notebooks. It is not an instruction from me. It's my preference. It's what I'm comfortable with. It's something that I can fire up and use really quickly. And I know my way around enough of it to explore a data set really quickly and visualize it in ways that make sense to me. But that's a personal decision. So if you like Python and you like Jupyter Notebooks, go for it. Okay. But if you don't, then don't. Very, very personal decision, that one.
Yep, there was a link I put in earlier in the chat. So we have a related project. It is not part of the challenge in any way, just to avoid any confusion. It is a project that we're running in partnership with Microsoft, who are also part of the IDSP. And it's to create tools and resources to support organizations engaging with and publishing open data. So if that is something that you do struggle with, and some of the things that Lucy's talked about today seem a little bit scary, then I've put a link in the chat there to a blog on that, and there's contact details there to another colleague of ours at the ODI. So as I say, it's completely separate to this challenge, but we are looking for people to test and trial some of those tools. So they may be beneficial to you if you do have any challenges or you're new to working with open data. I should also flag that when the challenge registration goes live on the 8th of February, and we have a challenge platform called Wazuku. The first webinar that we ran last Tuesday was an introduction to Wazuku there. There is a little bit of a matchmaking feature to that platform. So if you have a really good project idea, but you are lacking certain data skills, for example, you can reach out on that platform if anyone else is interested in joining a team who might have those skills to complement yours as well. And as I said, if you haven't pre-registered already, please do so, and I will share the recording of this. The recording includes the full webinar chat. So again, you'll get all of the links that we've shared already, but I'll put the links in the email as well to be safe. Yeah. We have another point from Steve. Open data and data science should be normal tools of any professional. However, government often lumps it into IT. This is a challenge, a different type of challenge.
Steve, don't get me started. I mean, yes, and you're not wrong, but one problem at a time. Okay, let's save the planet first. But yeah, it can be an issue, and open data is one thing, and it should be a function across IT plus comms plus any department that has an interest in getting their data out there. And data science is a technical discipline that involves being really, really good at pulling stories out of data. And that should not be just a technical IT thing.
Yeah.
An open data set of open data sets, there isn't such a thing, because it would be never ending. It would be never ending. Where would you stop? Yeah, and whose job is it to maintain it? You've gone forever. Is there a Windows data analytics client for MySQL? I can't answer that one. I don't really use it.
So the other questions just around registration and so on. So registration for the actual challenge is not yet open. That will be opening next week on the 8th of February. However, you can pre-register by emailing idspchallenge@theodi.org. So if you pre-register for that, once we've got this recording uploaded from this webinar today, as well as the links to recordings from the previous webinars, I will share that out to everyone who has pre-registered, and we'll also let everyone on that pre-register list know when the challenge platform is up and running. The challenge platform is called Wazuku, which is WAZOKU. Test of my mental spelling there. So we will let everyone know when registration is open for that, and you'll then get a link to register to Wazuku as well. And
coming back to Al's question about if you can't download something, can't use more than one database and produce unknown relationships. You talk about stitching two data sets together. Al, this is where you've got to look for common fields and attributes and the use of standards. So in the data that I've just been playing with, there's a very, very well-controlled standard code for local authority administrative areas, which meant that I could stitch two things together, because I knew that there would be, if it says that in this one, it says that in this one, it's the same place, no doubt about it. But standards are going to matter. Okay, I hope that answers what you're aiming to ask.
And there was another question from Laura. Where did you say the networking for teaming up with others will be happening? That will be happening on Wazuku when that goes live next week. There's not a Slack channel, but there is the option to communicate with other teams and individuals on Wazuku once you've registered on that platform.
Okay, I will, I could share my slides. What I can do is I'll pop another slide at the very end with the links to all the different data sources that I played with. Al, I hope that will help you maybe track down something that you can quickly have a look at that might meet your needs. But either way, it'll be there for anyone to use if they'd find that interesting or useful. Okay, about on time. Any other questions?
Well, I think we've got through all the questions. Slightly over 1 minute, very slightly over. So hopefully we haven't eaten into anyone's time and too much. Thank you, Lucy, for that really insightful and informative presentation. Thank you to everyone who joined today. One last shout, please do pre-register if you would like the recording, the slides, the links. I will collate all of these together and send those out to everyone who's pre-registered. So as a reminder, yes, I don't have your email addresses from Eventbrite, so that's the only way that I will have your contact details to send you anything.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say, because I work for the ODI, I can't sign up for this challenge, and I would dearly love to. So I'm counting on all of you. Okay, make me proud.
Thanks, everyone. We'll finish there. Enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world.